This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Thank you very much, Manny. And as Manny just said, I am Downrigger Dale with the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Thank you so much all for joining in. Just love the way this podcast has continued to grow with thousands and thousands of you all over the all over the United States. Of course, a bunch of you here in the great state of Montana as we talk about all what the Montana outdoors has to offer you. I want to do a special shout out to our active military. I'm just so honored that so many of you all across the world take some time out to listen to this podcast. Thank you very much for your emails, too. Hopefully this podcast brings a little bit of home to you as you do your thing all over the world. And thank you so much for your service. Now, let's continue on with this series I've been doing here about getting out of your comfort zone a little bit and, going out and discovering more of these great waterways that Montana has to offer. And boy, does this state have some incredible stuff. And a great way to learn about those is to check out visitmt.com and also send that link to your family and friends. So that way, when you're trying to get them to Montana, when they look at visitmt.com, they'll see that they can discover a land where adventure roams free, explore small towns where every corner tells a story and every greeting comes with a smile. Saddle up for breathtaking horseback rides or catch a fish in a crystal clear lake. Spend your evening sharing stories around a campfire under a starlit sky. That's how you Montana. Plan your trip at visitmt.com. That's visitmt.com. Now, I want to talk about an interesting area, and this is up in northwest Montana. Well, if you were right in between Libby and Kalispell. It's called the Thompson Chain of Lakes. In fact, I'll put a link in the podcast description for you so you can learn a little bit about the history of this lake. I won't go all into that now. Now, we're not going to cover every single one of the lakes because there's a lot of them up there. But it's a really cool place to go up and discover a lot of different species, get a lot of good fishing in, and see some just stunning country as well. So I want to talk today with Brian Stevens. He is with the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Fisheries Biologist based out of the Libby area. Am I correct there, Brian? You're out of Libby, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Brian, thanks so much for joining us and spending some time with me to learn about this great area. Now, when I have done a little research on this area, it's interesting because some websites will say there's 19 lakes in the chain of lakes, and some say 18. How many lakes are considered the Thompson Chain of Lakes?
Oh, the actual number's somewhere in that, 18, 19 range, but I guess there's maybe 15 that currently support recreational fisheries, a few more that had been tried in the past, but it's in the 15 to 16 lake area right now.
Yeah, and it is just some beautiful area. Now, let's learn a little bit more about you, and then we'll get into the whole biology of these lakes and the species. And again, we won't cover all of them. I'd keep you here for a couple of days if we did that. But
Sure.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Brian.
Yeah, I grew up in the Virginia Beach area. Went to Virginia Tech, got a fisheries degree there. Decided to continue pursuing fisheries as a career and ended up in Moscow, Idaho, at the University of Idaho to get a master's degree before I moved to Libby in 2006, hired by Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks to work on the Bonneville Power Administration funded mitigation program that was responsible for mitigating fisheries losses as a result of construction and operation of Libby Dam.
Mm-hmm.
And then most recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, I transitioned into this fisheries management biologist position.
Okay. And that must be a bit of a challenge for an area like Thompson Chain of Lakes. What all do you have to do, I mean, to cover all those lakes? Give us a little bit of some of the things you do there.
So, yeah, it's certainly a little bit of a challenge just because of the geographic area the position covers. So I'm the management biologist for all of Lincoln County, which includes the entire Kokanee River drainage and all surrounding water bodies, as well as the Thompson Chain of Lakes. So I'd be responsible for monitoring those fisheries and coming up with and evaluating regulations, changes, proposals, stocking rates. I also spend quite a bit of time doing stream permitting. So yeah, just the geographic area and the scope of work keeps me plenty busy.
Mm-hmm. Now, as far as the Thompson Chain of Lakes go, there's about, as you said, about 15 that are, in the fishing part of things. Tell us a bit about those. So are they natural lakes or any of them man-made? And give us maybe a little bit of the approximate location of the chain of lakes.
Sure. Yeah, as far as I know, they're all natural lakes. And again, very diverse. As you mentioned, located about halfway between Libby and Kalispell along Highway 2. So starting, I guess, on the west, Loon Lake, all the way up to maybe Crystal Lake. Loon Lake's an open system. It's fed the inlet and outlet are Pleasant Valley Fisher River, so it's in the Kokanee River drainage via the Fisher River. A couple of those larger lakes right there and the smaller lakes included are closed basin lakes. Once you move east to Upper Thompson, everything from Upper Thompson east is actually in the lower Clark Fork River drainage via the Thompson River.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's go through some of these lakes and just talk a bit about the fish in them and some of the biology of those lakes. So what I was thinking is we'd kind of just do a little tour of it here. If we were going on Highway 2 and we were heading from Libby to towards Kalispell, one of the first lakes you'd come along to would be Loon Lake. Now, I found in a website, I don't know if it was a state parks website or one of them that said there was walleye in that. Found out later, nope, that is not true. You'd talk to me about that before we started. But talk about the different species of fish in Loon Lake.
So Loon Lake's really diverse, as are most of a lot of the larger chain lakes, and there's the history there is, either trial and error by the state fish management agency or illegal introductions. Currently, Loon Lake has viable fisheries for primarily yellow perch, large and smallmouth bass, northern pike. Recently, there have been some black crappie that have shown up, and there's still a fishery for wild rainbow trout that exists in that lake as well.
Oh, okay. All right. Does that lake get much fishermen in there? I mean, is it a pretty popular lake overall?
It's fairly popular, but it's because of the features of the ramp, it's difficult to get a larger boat in there. So it tends to be more popular with folks in smaller boats.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, because of the diversity of fish species available, people do target it fairly often.
About what size of that lake is it? Do you know?
A couple 100 acres. It's probably 200.
Okay. All right. Now, if we were to continue on, going west, next lake we would come across is Horseshoe Lake. Now, that lake is one of the few lakes that has the big old Tiger Muskie in it. How did Tiger Muskie get in there, and how prevalent are they?
So I think decades ago, I think the state tried to get several different recreational sport fisheries established in there with little success. And basically the lake had abundant populations of native suckers and pike minnow, and there was just too much competition to really get like a trout fishery started. So due to the size of the lake, it wasn't really an option to treat it, to remove all of those fish. So as early as the 1990s, the state started considering biological controls, one of which would be, a large predatory fish. So the interesting thing about tiger muskies is that they're a sterile hybrid between a pure muskellunge and a northern pike. So they can occur for one generation in the wild if, like in Wisconsin or something where they have both pike and muskies.
Right.
Those fish could cross, but their offspring would be sterile. So hatcheries in the Midwest have been raising these sterile tiger muskies for, recreational fisheries for years. And Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks decided that this might be a viable option for kind of reducing those minnow and pike minnow and sucker populations in the lake, in the hopes of, one, being able to provide a recreational salmonid fishery, and two, provide a unique opportunity for a trophy fishery for tiger muskies.
Yeah, now that's a really interesting fish. I mean, they are a voracious eater. Not something we see much ever in Montana. So how often do you guys have to continue to stock those tiger muskies since they don't reproduce?
Right. So the intent of the initial planting of tiger muskies was to reduce those, some people call them rough fish populations. So we first planted them in 2006, 2007, around then. I think we were getting those fish from Wisconsin, in fact. And the plan was and still is to stock 500 a year, every other year. So we would kind of pulse it, and we wanted to monitor the impact they were having on the existing fish populations. Sometime around 2010, we had issues with the source. There were disease issues at the hatchery we were getting the fish from, so we didn't have a source for several years. So about maybe 2015, we found another source out of Nebraska that was certified disease-free, and that's been pretty steady. So since 2015, we've been putting about 500 in every other year, unless the hatchery system, I think they raise them in Miles City. If the hatchery system has surplus fish, I will take some of those and put them in Horseshoe kind of opportunistically, just to see if we can increase the abundance and availability to anglers.
Now, how long do they live, tiger muskie?
Over 10 years,
really?
For sure.
Okay.
They're kind of elusive. That lake is really clear, so you can see them sometimes if they're there, but they're notorious for following lures and not eating. And even our gill net monitoring, we don't want to catch too many of the big ones, right? Because a lot of times that's lethal.
Yeah.
So we often don't catch them in the nets, but we see them in the lake.
So, what have you heard from anglers? Have you done any like creel studies and that there to see as far as how often they're getting caught or the size of those things?
Nothing formal in terms of a creel survey or census, but I have talked to anglers in the past that have caught them. I know several folks who have caught at least one over 40 inches. I talked to one guy that caught two in one summer. I think he said he caught a 40 and a 44. But like I said, you can see them there. They're still present in the lake, and hopefully with this more regular stocking schedule, that'll be a continuing theme.
Now, how big are they when you stock them?
The plan is to put about a 4 to 6 inch fish in. If we have holdovers or surplus fish at the hatchery, they could be as big as 11 inches. And what we saw early on from those 2006, 2007 plants, we were catching some of those fish every year as they grew and recruited to the gear. And it seemed like it took them about 4 years to get to 32 inches after we stocked them.
Wow. That's a big fish, though.
Really phenomenal growth early on. And then, the regulation for harvest, if one were so inclined to harvest a tiger muskie, it has to be 40 inches. Seems like it took at least 6 years for it to get from a 4 to 8 inch fish when it was stocked to 40 inches, which would be legal for harvest.
Okay. So, what do you anticipate as far as how plentiful that this this lake rather is going to get with tiger muskie? Is it something that you think is going to start to grow and grow and grow, or are we kind of at where it will be usually?
For now, since the program started almost 20 years ago now, it seems to be fairly stable. I think those first couple of plants, just because of the existing fish population in the lake, I think survival was much better, right? I think there were a lot of smaller suckers and pike minnows, and since the tiger muskie were introduced, they seem to have shifted the size structure of those other fish populations. It's mostly larger individuals in fewer numbers. Mm-hmm. So the planted tiger muskie seem to be doing their job in terms of keeping those minnow and sucker populations from continuing to expand. But in the last decade or so, or since the tiger muskie stockings have become more regular, it seems to have stabilized at fairly low densities of tiger muskies, but still present. And I don't know in the future if we'll consider putting even more in. But for now, it's stable at low densities is what I would say.
Okay. Where else in Montana, do you know where else in Montana you can find tiger muskie? I mean, there's not many other places, is there?
No, I think Dead Man's Basin Reservoir is a popular spot. I believe one of the state records had come out of there. Mm-hmm. But they're used kind of sparingly, I think, in very specific circumstances.
Yeah. What other things are anglers targeting there in Horseshoe Lake?
Yeah, so prior to the tiger muskie introduction, there really wasn't much of a sport fishery at all. So in the last 20 years or so, illegally introduced smallmouth bass have shown up. I know some folks target those, and because the tiger muskies were effective at reducing those other fish populations, around 2011 we started planting kokanee in there again.
Oh, okay.
And that fishery has shown a lot of promise. It's fairly popular, both open water and ice fishing, and we're seeing good numbers of, maybe 11-inch class kokanee, but really healthy-looking fat fish.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good eating size right there. So would you say that's probably the most popular fish in Horseshoe Lake as far as anglers go, is the kokanee?
Certainly, yes, in recent years. I know there's a dedicated group that will target those tiger muskies, but yeah, I'd say most people that are specifically targeting a species are targeting kokanee.
Okay. Well, as we move along here on our little audio tour of Thompson Chain of Lakes, the next one we would come to would be Crystal Lake. Tell us a little bit about Crystal Lake and what anglers find in Crystal Lake.
Yeah, I mentioned how diverse, the fisheries were in this chain of lakes, and Crystal is one that has remained fairly stable in terms of a limited fish community. So Crystal is primarily a kokanee fishery. We stock it with kokanee. Popular really in the winter more so than the summer. Mm-hmm. Similar size class to Horseshoe Lake, 10, 11, 12-inch fish most of the time. We've also planted it with rainbow trout.
Oh.
So, yeah, and there's a limited fishery for rainbow trout. We do occasionally see fish up to and a little bit over 10 pounds come out of there.
Wow.
But other than that, there's perch, yellow perch, which were illegally introduced a while ago. Decent size structure at times, and there's a few largemouth bass, pumpkinseed sunfish, but it's primarily kokanee, rainbow trout, and yellow perch.
Mm-hmm. I've talked to a few other biologists around the northwest Montana, and I often hear that, this fish was illegally introduced and that one, which is, as a biologist for FWP, that's got to be very frustrating. Was that maybe that illegal practice, and I'll stress that, folks, that is illegal, and you are going to get in a lot of trouble if you get caught doing that, not to mention it can ruin a fishery. But was that something maybe that was more so in the past, or do you guys continue to see illegal introductions on a regular basis, up in that area?
So we do still see it. I don't know. The Thompson Chain of Lakes is weird because there's so many different fish species already there. There's not a whole lot else that people could move around.
Yeah.
The most recent are, I mentioned in Loon Lake, black crappie are now present. That's probably the most recent widespread illegal introduction. And prior to that, it would have been smallmouth bass. So, in the last 10 to 20 years, I think is when those two species are really being moved around.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's unfortunate. And I am going to put a link to the Tipmont, and then, of course, I'll put the number for Tipmont, too. And, again, all of you that listen, if you ever hear of any of that, be sure and report that, because that can really mess up a lake. All right, let's move along here. Let's talk about the Upper Thompson Lake. Now, that would be the next lake we'd come to after Crystal. Tell us a bit about the biology in that lake, and what do most anglers target there?
Yeah, Upper Thompson Lake is kind of interesting, and I'm not sure if everybody, especially if you're not from the area, realizes this, but Upper Thompson Lake is kind of naturally divided, or unnaturally via roads and culverts and stuff, into three separate lobes. So if you think about Upper, Middle, and Lower Thompson, those are three of the big lakes, but Upper itself has three lobes. So Upper Thompson, it's similar to the others in terms of fish populations.
Mm-hmm.
Bass fishing's popular, yellow perch fishing's popular, northern pike fishing is popular. There also are kokanee present in Upper Thompson. Those are a result of natural reproduction from stockings from maybe the 1960s. Upper Thompson's no longer stocked with kokanee, but it does have a naturally reproducing population.
Huh.
And it gets rainbow trout on a 3-year rotation with the other two main Thompson lakes. So rainbow trout get planted once every 3 years in Upper Thompson. And we see fish, anglers catch fish in the 8 to 10 pound class occasionally.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break here, Brian, and then when we come back, we'll talk a bit about the largest lake, which is in the Thompson Chain of Lakes, which is the Middle Thompson Lake, and we'll learn a bit about that one when we continue right after this. I've mentioned it before, and I'll say it again. It means a great deal to everyone that works on this podcast to have so many of you listening each week. Thank you all so very much. Another huge thank you needs to also go out to my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Without their support, we simply would not have a podcast. Just like us, you can depend on Superior Hardwoods of Montana, especially when you're ready to turn the place you live into your home. Now, what do I mean? Well, the place you live is not really your home until it reflects who you are. One of the best ways to do that is to go see my friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. For example, they have some incredible antique redwood reclaimed from a Marcus Daly water plume built back in 1917, running from Georgetown Lake to the Phillipsburg mines. They have many other reclaimed options to choose from, as well as like corral board, antique oak, granary lumber, barn siding that is beautifully aged from natural weathering. That could be perfect for your home's soffit, siding, or paneling on an accent wall. They also have antiqued hand-hewn beams and saw-cut timbers that in a way is a tribute to our American history and to your home. Superior Hardwoods is also the place to find the perfect wood to create the ultimate outdoor space, like that incredible deck you've always wanted. Yeah, Superior Hardwoods of Montana is for sure your decking headquarters. Not only do they have a variety of exotic hardwood decking options, but they also have domestic classic traditional cedar. And the best part of that is they are offering exclusive pricing on gorgeous high-quality cedar decking right now. There are lots of benefits to cedar decking. It is resistant to temperature and weather conditions. It won't warp due to moisture. It is rot resistant and requires less maintenance than other softwoods. Go see them on the web at superior-hardwoods.com or stop by their showroom in Missoula and let them guide you through the woods. Remember, on the web, it's superior-hardwoods.com. Oh, you're going to love what they do to your home. We are back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast. My guest is Brian Stevens. He's with the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Fisheries Biologist, and has a huge responsibility of a lot of waterways all up in northwest Montana. The area we're talking about is the Thompson Chain of Lakes, and it really is just a fascinating area. I've only got to sample it a little bit this summer, which summer's kind of started, but I am for sure going to spend some time up there this year and discover more of these lakes. The lake I want to talk about now is the largest lake in the Thompson Chain of Lakes, and that's the Middle Thompson Lake. What size would you say the Middle Thompson Lake is?
Middle Thompson's about 550 acres.
Okay. And what do most fishermen find there?
Middle Thompson's, again, like the rest of them, it's pretty diverse, but it's a very popular Kokanee salmon fishery. So I would guess Kokanee is probably one of the most popular, followed by, again, bass, yellow perch, northern pike, some rainbow trout opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Now, are most of these Thompson Chain of Lakes, do they see a lot of ice fishermen as well?
They do, particularly for the salmon and the yellow perch, you know, and northern pike as well.
Mm-hmm. And those areas are beautiful in the wintertime as well. And the neat thing about the Thompson Chain of Lakes is most of them are pretty accessible, aren't they?
Yeah, to various degrees. Some have better boat ramps than others in terms of open water fishing, but yeah, certainly being located within our state parks program, there is a lot of public access to these lakes.
Yeah, and some decent campgrounds. Some are a little more primitive than others, but definitely something where you could, spend a weekend or two and just have a ball up there discovering these lakes. And we'll get into more detail about Middle Thompson. But the other thing I want to ask you about is, often when people hear the Thompson Chain of Lakes, they envision it as they're connected, but they're not really connected, are they?
Well, the main three, so upper, middle, and lower Thompson, are all connected by small channels. Yep. Upper Thompson, so between Upper Thompson and Middle Thompson, that's just a culvert, so it's not a passable channel for a boat. But Lower and Middle Thompson are connected by a shallow, passable channel, especially in small watercraft.
So you do see fish moving then between those main three lakes then?
Yeah, particularly between Lower Thompson and Middle Thompson.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, as popular as the Kokanee fishery is in Middle Thompson is no longer directly stocked with Kokanee salmon.
Huh.
Lower Thompson is stocked, and certainly there's some movement of stocked Kokanee from Lower into Middle. But years ago, it was determined that Middle was capable of supporting some natural reproduction. Maybe 80% of the Kokanee in Middle Thompson are produced in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
So stocking was discontinued on Middle. However, some of those stocked fish that end up being planted in Lower Thompson certainly could migrate into Middle Thompson.
Okay. So back to Middle Thompson then. Kokanee seems to be the more popular of the fish, you say, in that area. Anything else that seems to get a little more pressure than others?
Bass. There's a lot of bass fishermen and pike fishermen, and again, yellow perch, a lot of times through the ice. Good size structure for all these fisheries. There's, a good average size of perch and bass, but there's also some really large individuals as well.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Lower Thompson Lake then. So that's as we move, again, just visualizing, we're going from Libby towards Kalispell, so that would be the next one. What do we find in Lower Thompson? Pretty much a lot of the same things as Middle Thompson, or anything different there?
No, it's probably the exact same fish community, just a little different nature to the lake. It's a little smaller, but again, planted with Kokanee every year, so it provides a popular Kokanee fishery. and yellow perch as well. Lots of nice bass, northern pike. There are a few, brown trout and brook trout, but very, very low densities, but some large individuals, and those are a result of two things: historic stockings, in the 1990s or earlier, and the connectivity between those lakes and the Thompson River itself, which is full of brown trout.
Mm-hmm. So in the lower Thompson, of those three, so you've got lower, middle, and upper, what would you say is probably the more popular one for anglers? Or do you know?
Middle Thompson is probably the most popular, middle and lower for sure.
And why is that? Does it just seem to have a little more density of fish or access, or what do you think would be the reason that those two seem to be a little more popular?
Honestly, I think it comes down to access.
Yeah.
The boat ramps at both of those lakes are really good, no matter what size boat you have. Upper Thompson, being divided into those three different lobes, and the ramps are a little shallower. You're kind of limited on upper versus once you get a boat in on lower or middle, you can pretty much go anywhere, and it's nice and easy.
Mm-hmm. And of these lakes in the Thompson chain of lakes, are all of them, the ones that we've talked about here, are they all allowed as far as motorized boats and that, or is there any restrictions on size of boat, anything like that?
No, I think and I'm not even sure what this means. I think like on Loon Lake, there's a voluntary no wake restriction. I'm not sure the history of that, but no, all the larger lakes are big enough and open enough that there's not necessarily a boat or motor restriction on them. And
how much traffic do you see in these lakes as far as like just pleasure craft, water skiers, that sort of stuff? I know sometimes fishermen and the pleasure boaters, they might bump heads a little bit, but what do you see there? Are most of those lakes just mainly attracting anglers, or is it just a little of everything?
It's a little of everything, and it seems like every year the number of recreational boaters just keeps increasing.
Yeah.
I think it's probably that way everywhere.
Yeah, and I get this a lot, where I get a lot of emails of people that say, "Hey, why don't you ask this question or check into this?" And a lot of that gets centered around how do we get rid of these recreational boaters? Well, you can't, folks. I mean, we got to all try to get along, but that can be a challenge. Now, I know one thing that's bugged quite a few folks are the wake boats, that produce that big wake for the wake surfing. Do you see that much on these smaller lakes?
Not a ton, hopefully those people are finding even larger bodies of water to go do that on. Kokanee is popular, and hopefully that, the people that are looking for places to do that, they realize that the bigger the water body, the better off they're going to be. It just makes sense. Yeah,
it really does. I mean, it becomes a real problem with fishermen, and I've heard a lot about, that it can, mess with the shoreline a little bit. How about as far as like the wave runners and that? Do you see a lot of traffic of those at all?
A fair bit, yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, kind of more and more every year. But as you alluded to, everybody who wants to recreate on these bodies of water has that right, I suppose.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Main thing is, when you get into that, especially. And I'm going to put a link into this podcast as far as just some of the rules of the road for boaters. So often I think people don't realize that there are actual rules of the road, and then just some kind of ethics that you want to look into, just so we all get along a little better here. So I'm going to put that link in. When I've done that in the past, I've found that people are a little surprised by some of those rules. So take a look at that, folks, and do try to follow that, because it really does make a difference. Now, in looking at this incredible chain of lakes, which again is just, to me, I just am so fascinated with it that, being everything so close together that as a fisherman, you could just, spend a weekend and really browse around and find all kinds of different species and really, I think just have a blast up there. It's something that I'd like to see, some more people maybe give that a try that have never gone to this part of Montana and check that out. I know we don't have numbers as far as actual fishing pressure numbers, especially when you get into such a large system like this. But do you find that you're seeing a growth of more anglers, or is it less? What, just your own kind of personal feel? Do you feel like it's getting more popular, less popular, or staying the same?
I think things are getting busier. For sure. And and it seems like there, just like everywhere in Montana, there's a little bit more development happening even in the vicinity of the Thompson chain. So there's more residents, at least seasonal. But yeah, just getting outside and getting on the water seems to be becoming more popular every year.
And what would you say is, if you've noticed as you're working through there, as far as the style of angling that seems to work better? Is it a lot of jigging? Do you see a lot of trolling? What do you see as far as the majority of anglers, the techniques that they're using? Especially when you get a lot of these kokanee people. I know that can go anywhere from trolling to jigging. What do you see most of?
Yeah, that'll change. These anglers are pretty resourceful, right? They know how to catch the fish, so it'll change by season. But right now, a lot of kokanee anglers are trolling, in the top portion of the water column. But if they can find fish and sit on them and jig, they'll do whatever it takes to hook into some.
Yeah. How about as far as guiding? Do you find many guides up in that area?
I don't, honestly, on those lakes. I know there's some light outfitter use, but it's not real prevalent, I don't think.
Yeah, the Big Sky Fishing Charters, I think, does a little bit in that area, but I'll do a little more checking on that, folks, and then in the podcast description, if there are any that you could hire for the area, I'll put those down in the podcast description there and put a link to them. I know, and I always recommend that, especially for people that are just going to be there for a weekend, never discovered the lake. Sometimes a fishing guide can be a really nice way to enjoy a lake and learn a lot more about it by hiring a guide for a day and just getting out there and learning what you find, what techniques to use and that. So if that is possible, I think it's probably going to be Big Sky Fishing Charters, but I'll do a little more checking on that, and we'll put that in there. So look for those links down at the bottom of that. We're going to take one more quick break here, Brian, and then we'll be back to just kind of cover the overall bit of the Thompson Channel Lakes and wrap it up with you. So we'll do that right after this. Hey, gang, thanks for supporting and listening to this podcast. I can't tell you how much it means to all of us that you're here. And speaking of support, we would not be able to do this podcast at all if it weren't for sponsors like Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. It is truly an honor to have Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer on our team. If you own a trailer, you ought to think about adding them to your team too. They can service your trailer, and when it comes to repairing trailers, well, you won't find anyone better at it than Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. If it's parts you need to do your own service and repairs, well, they are the place for that. Another thing you may not know about Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer is they install all kinds of accessories for the truck that pulls your trailer. Whether it's just the necessary items to help your truck get the trailer down the road perfectly, or all those gadgets and bells and whistles to dress your truck up a bit and, well, make it your unique style. And here's the best part. The folks that do all those repairs and installations are real technicians. They do things the right way and do it to such a degree of precision and reliability that you can roll down the road with confidence. Whether you need your trailer bearings packed, the whole thing rewired, or the right fifth wheel, or any kind of hitch installed, you're going to know that your trailer is ready to haul what you want worry-free. No matter if it's getting you and your four-legged coworker to the next rodeo or job, or just hauling a load to the dump, or getting the boat and RV to your favorite fishing hole, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has you covered. And of course, if you need a new trailer, they can set you up with a brand new Diamond C gooseneck equipment, dump trailer, or whatever else you need to haul wherever you are going, worry-free, happy, and looking good, too. Heck, they even carry an amazing line of CM truck beds that'll make your rig look and work like new. It's what they do at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're in Missoula, or you can find them on the web at rmtte.com. That's rmtte.com. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Go see them. In Montana, discover a land where adventure roams free. Explore small towns where every corner tells a story and every greeting comes with a smile. Saddle up for breathtaking horseback rides or catch a fish in a crystal clear lake. Spend your evening sharing stories around a campfire under a starlit sky. That's how you Montana. Plan your trip at visitmt.com. That's visitmt.com. Back here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast, want to thank our sponsors so much for making it possible. Our three sponsors, of course, is that have just been so helpful for us for a long time. Well, a new sponsor, too, the state of Montana and Visit Montana. We sure appreciate them joining us, too, because that does help a lot. And, of course, if you support them, that supports what we do here. Brian, what would you say is the overall health of the Thompson and Chain of Lakes as far as the fisheries go? Is it doing pretty well? Are there some challenges that you're seeing? What do you think?
I think they're, for what they are, they're in really good shape. Most of the lakes provide high quality fishing opportunities for a variety of species. So, like I mentioned before, kokanee, bass, northern pike, yellow perch, all of the lakes or some of the lakes provide excellent opportunities for a variety of species. Now, that being said, the challenge is kind of managing or existing in that framework of multiple species competing for the same resources. But these lakes have kind of existed like this in terms of bass, pike, perch, kokanee, trout for decades.
Right.
And they're pretty stable and continue to provide really outstanding opportunities for a lot of different species.
Mm-hmm. That's got to be a challenge, though, as far as, getting a feel for, what's going on there and what species might start to struggle or that. How do you guys do that? I mean, that is just a lot of ground to cover, especially that it's, it's not a river. So you've got separate water bodies. Do you constantly do a lot of gill netting and things to try to figure out what's going on? How do you assess that? That's got to be difficult.
Yeah, we do a lot of gill net monitoring in the lakes, and that is targeted towards species of interest. So we target in the fall kokanee salmon because those are the fish that we stock. So if we see changes in kokanee salmon abundance or size, class distribution, we can react to that with changing the stocking rates. Same thing with the lakes that get planted with rainbow trout. We'll target those in the spring to see if those are potentially returning to the creel. In the midst of doing those kind of standardized seasonal sampling, that's when we encounter all of the other stuff that we're not necessarily targeting because we didn't put it there.
Yeah.
But that's where we get information on how these fish species are interacting with each other and what the impact of, say, an increasing smallmouth bass population might be on the existing fish community.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that when you look down there, folks, in the description, I'm going to put a link to the regulations for this area, and that'll help you too. Anytime you start discovering a new area, you really want to watch that and make sure you're staying within the limits and that. And it also gives you some pretty good insight too. So take a look at that. I think you'll find some of that interesting as well. Now, I'll put you on the spot here a little bit, Brian, and this will be a tough question, but you've worked in this area, you've seen a lot of this stuff. personally, is there a lake that is more of a favorite of yours in the Thompson Chain of Lakes than others?
So yeah, boy, I like several of them, but personally, and I'm not saying this is the one that fishes the best for me, but I think Loon Lake is probably one of the more interesting ones. Again, it probably doesn't fish the best for me for any of the species, but it's different from the other ones because it's a lot darker water. It just seems a little bit more mysterious.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got several different species that are very catchable, the bass, perch, pike, rainbow trout, crappie. It's just a neat lake to be on. Most of the other lakes in the chain are a lot clearer.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of see what's going on a little bit better. And Loon has just always intrigued me. Again, it's never been the best in terms of results, but it sure is fun to fish.
Yeah. You're kind of like me. I find that half the fun of fishing is the hunt, is trying to figure that water body out and, seeing what you can target in that. So, yeah, that's interesting. Okay. As far as wildlife around that area, what would people see mostly, do you think?
Several of the lakes have at least a pair of loons on them. Certainly eagles, osprey, deer. I've heard there's bears in the area, black bears mainly, but it's getting busy enough with people now, especially in the summer, that a lot of the big game species kind of stay away during the daylight hours.
Yeah. So there's not really a huge concern. Of course, always, take your bear spray and all that, but not a big concern as far as bear problems up in that area then?
No, and food storage, for campers and everything
Sure,
has been
yeah.
prioritized just because that's an attractant for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, once a bear gets used to that, then it's all done for them. So do watch out for that. And then, not far from there are all kinds of other cool stuff. I mean, we're talking really Glacier Park isn't that far from there. So, I mean, there's some beauty and incredible stuff to see in that area. As far as you as an angler, Brian, what do you target most in the Thompson Chain of Lakes, just as out there fishing for yourself?
A little bit of everything, but if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be the pike, just because they're big and the fishing is active, and they're tasty too. So you don't feel bad about keeping a few if you get some nice ones, but it's just a hoot trying to find a big toothy critter in one of those lakes.
Yeah. And they're a lot of fun, and actually, pike are pretty good eating too. So. Have you ever caught one of those big Tiger Muskie in Horseshoe Lake?
I haven't. I've tried. I'll admit I've tried dozens of times, and I've had dozens of follows, but I've never hooked into one.
Yeah, they're an interesting critter. I mean, it's just so hard to figure out what makes them tick. I don't know. Do you see a lot of people using some of the new like live scope and that in that area? I wonder if that's going to become something of a more useful way to target those. I did a podcast recently and talked with Don Wilkins, who he's a guide over in the Fort Peck area, but he has some videos, and he uses the live scope a lot in teaching people fishing, and it's really interesting how it allows you to watch your jig and watch the fish come in, and then as you move that lure, it allows you to see how the fish will react. And I wonder if that might be a way to try to figure those Tiger Muskie out. Do they tend to concentrate in a certain area, or do you know, or are they just a real elusive fish?
So that lake is really, really clear, and I mean, you can see at times 15 feet down or more.
Wow!
And where I've encountered them is the shoreline is just full of large trees that have fallen in. They tend to be hanging out in the most complex woody structure on the lake, but that complex woody structure is everywhere. They're not, the tiger muskies that I've seen, they don't seem real shy. They're just reluctant to actually open their mouth and eat something.
Yeah, and that's why it's called, as the old saying goes, that's why it's called fishing and not catching. But
right, and the pure muskie have the informal classification of the fish of 10,000 casts. I guess there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Well, so they're exhibiting the traits of their two ancestors there, and that's got to be a frustration, especially when you can see them. To me, that actually gets a little more frustrating. And some of these live scope deals, I think that can really wear on some of these fishermen too, because they see the fish, they see it right there, they just can't get them to react. So that's interesting stuff. Overall, Brian, before I let you go here, what would you say is your biggest challenge, looking forward in this wonderful but complex fishery? Any big challenges coming up, and along with that, what are some things us anglers can do to help you guys?
Yeah, you touched on the big one for sure earlier. It's the illegal introductions, moving fish around. These lakes are already plumb full of a lot of different species, most of which are top-level predators. I'm not sure these lakes could handle much more. If we start seeing some other predatory fish in there, it's going to be one more mouth to feed, one more species to compete with everything that is already there that people already enjoy fishing for. So that's certainly the biggest threat on the radar that we're always watching for. And the other one is, with expanding populations and development of people, how are these fisheries going to react to that increase in pressure? Mm-hmm. Everybody's certainly got a right to be out there and fish, and I hope they do, and I hope they enjoy it. But we'll just have to keep an eye on what we can do to make sure that these fisheries continue to provide high quality opportunities for an increasing number of anglers.
So if any of our listeners would like to interact with you and have more questions, is it okay if they send you an email, or how do you like to be contacted?
Either way, if you look up any of the Thompson chain on the FishMT website, it should have me listed as a contact. So email, phone call, whatever works for folks.
Okay. And when you go down to those links there in the podcast description, folks, I'll have a link that you can just click, and it'll pull your email program right up, and you can email Brian directly right off of that. Make it real simple and easy, and that way, just ask him some questions, give him some input. That's how these guys get a lot of the good info. So be sure and interact with him. Brian, I want to thank you so much for all your time, and especially for all that you and the folks you work with do up in that area, because it really is a neat place to go fishing and just explore. So thanks so much for all your time, and hopefully we can get back together again soon and talk some more about these other areas that you're working on as well.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. There is Brian Stevens doing a great job up in the Thompson chain of lakes. I really encourage you guys to take a look at this area and discover it. And I think you're going to find that you will get addicted to this area. There is so much to see and do. And then, as we go along, we'll get into some of the rivers and some of the other areas, because there's a lot to discover in the Thompson chain of lakes and beyond. Again, any questions, comments, any of that, it's all there in that podcast, links there in the podcast description, so just jump on that. Until then, have a great time, be safe out there, be good to each other, and we'll see you next time here on the Montana Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock, high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.